Good morning. I'm texting my husband. Hold on. I had to send him a heart. How are you guys? What a week. I've got a cold. I debated on whether to do a show today or not because who wants to listen to this read? So if you don't want to hear me read, let me know and we'll just talk. Um, we had a beautiful, beautiful wedding on Sunday or Saturday. My youngest son and his fiance Jess got married, and it was just lovely. And I want to thank you guys so much for everybody who prayed for good weather because the forecast was rain, rain, rain. And while it did rain the day before and the morning of, it did not rain for the rest of the day. And it was just lovely. And it was kind of overcast, which was nice because it was outside. They got married at this little place called in Kentucky called Pumpkin Hollow Resort. And it is out there. I mean, it is exactly where you think Pumpkin Hollow would be. There's these two real low water crossing, high water I don't know how that works. But the road kind of goes down through two creeks, and my parents were late. We had to hold the wedding, and it was just an interesting day. So my oldest son, David, officiated the ceremony, which was lovely. He did such a good job. And Jake's the one that got married. Jake got all choked up at one point, and was teary-eyed, which messed up David, which messed up Jess, which got the rest of us. And it was just lovely. You know, there's something about seeing your youngest child get married. I like, when did he grow up? You know, when did all of this happen? It's just crazy. He's trying to think how old he is this year. 27. So yeah, I don't know. It's just crazy that my baby is 27 and that my middle child is expecting her third child and that my oldest grandson is going to be 12. In 6 more years, he'll be out of the house. We have the same birthday, and I just refuse to believe that. And then for some reason, I had it in my head that my youngest grandson was going to be 6 this year. And I found out he's going to be 7. And I'm like, when did that happen? What is going on here? I just don't understand. But anyway, if you're just getting here, please hit the thumbs up as you come in. If you're in the chat, you have to close the chat to do that. If you're watching on your television, all you have to do is hit the up button, and you'll see my little channel up on the left. And then on the right, you'll see a thumbs up button, and you can just hit it right there. So interesting. I just, little things I talk about until everybody gets here. But so I love the show Chicks on the Right, and they're here on Rumble. They're also on YouTube. If you guys haven't watched them, they're just sweet ladies, very entertaining. And they apparently, so I messaged them yesterday and said, look, I would be happy to mod for you in your chat because there is some idiot in their chat who was in my chat this morning, because I commented about it in their chat, was in my chat this morning. And they just type fart, 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 fart as many characters times as it'll let them type that. And then they just hit enter, and they do this over and over and over again. And it's killing the chat over there. Like nobody's there. There's like 3 people that are chatting anymore because it is just overrun with this. So I messaged the ladies yesterday, and she's like, just block them. And I said, you can't block as a chatter on Rumble. You have to be a moderator, or you have to own the channel. So she went in and she blocked them, which doesn't do any good because, as all of you can probably attest to, what really happens is they just go and change their name, and then they come in and they start doing it again. And they were in my chat this morning. I had to come through before the show started and delete one of them. And so I actually screenshotted what is going on in their chat. Well, it was funny because Mock commented on it today, and she said, we didn't even know we had a chat on Rumble. And I'm like, well, that explains why they don't respond to any of the comments or the super chats. They were completely unaware they had a chat there. So I reached out to him again today. I sent him the screenshot, and I was like, seriously, guys, come on, your chat's become untenable. People are just not chatting. And I know people are like, oh, just ignore it. Sure, you can ignore it. How many people do you think are going to ignore that? Not a whole lot. They're going to see it and they're going to be like, this chat sucks. And the whole point of a chat is you're creating community with your viewers. And so, I'm not about like censoring people that just have a different opinion. But bot type activity where you're just posting links or just one word over and over again, or you're attacking the regular people that are there, you got to go. I mean, this is like a party at my house, right? My channel isn't a free speech platform. Rumble is, but my channel is not. If you come to my house, which is my channel, and you act like an asshole, you're getting blocked. I'm just not going to put up with that because I'm not going to let that kind of cancer and rot into my chat. I'm just not doing it. And I'm hoping the ladies will agree because, I mean, it's not like it costs them anything. I'll just be there Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, blocking the assholes for them for free. I mean, this is like a free karma service, karma delivery. Here I am. So if you guys watch Chicks on the Right, shoot them a tweet and say, hey, Nurse Penny's good people. You ought to let her mod your chat because no one wants to chat in your chat anymore because of these people. I don't allow party guests to talk about all the corn in their poo. Exactly, Gypsy Princess, right? I mean, anywhere else in any common, like if this were the town square, we would all just move our group somewhere else. We wouldn't sit where we could hear these people. And so this idea of free speech and just letting them completely overrun your chat is crazy. And so, I mean, I have 3 mods here. I don't know if they're here today. But, I mean, if I can't always see the chat, well, yeah, I can actually. So if I see people come in and act like a-holes, I will absolutely get rid of them because the chat is for the people to chat, right? It's not for them to beat each other up or abuse each other or just spam my chat with all kinds of stuff. So hopefully the ladies will realize that because we like to watch on Rumble. I don't even think they knew they were getting donos. I'm like, check your account. You actually get donos on Rumble. And I have donated to them there. So I don't think they were just aware of any of that. So if you follow Chicks on the Right, if you don't, you should, because it's a great show. But if you follow them, give me a shout out so we can get a mod in that chat room because it is absolutely awful. Awful. I don't know why people have to be dicks. I don't understand it. So anyway, on Twitter this week, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I'm at Witthealth Coach, WITT Health Coach. Hold on. I'm going to pull this. I think that's what it is. Yeah, at Witthealth Coach. And it's pretty much snark of all the crap that goes on in the world. And so we've been discussing this Stormy Daniels trial. Well, yeah, it's not really a Stormy Daniels trial. Actually, it's just an accounting trial that they brought Stormy Daniels in so that she could bring her typical porn drama in and like there's no legal reason for her to be giving testimony because the charge is an accounting issue. So Stormy Daniels is just there for entertainment and not good entertainment at that. But anyway, I've been chatting back and forth with this guy. His channel is Bill Pegulian, Peguillan, Peguillan. And so he had posted, Stormy Daniels owes Trump $600,000. What a terrible hooker she is. And I said, she did end up on the wrong side of that equation, didn't she? And Bill says, an equation she'll never understand. I said, I keep waiting for her to shout back at Trump's attorney, but my tits are really big. Look at them. Just look at them. He says, she wants to, but she's been coached by her lawyers who should be disbarred. I said, it's a lot like watching pornography. No plot, and the only objective is watching someone get effed. And that is just so true. I'm so over this. And what's interesting is it's backfiring. It is totally backfiring. So what's happening, and if you're not watching all of this, and I will talk about this on Friday, but if you're not watching all of this, that case is falling apart because everybody that they've brought on to testify, so the prosecutors are presenting their case, they brought on the what is he called? The control officer, who's like the accounting guy for the Trump thing. And they couldn't find any wrongdoing in him. And so then they bring up Stormy Daniels, who's like, I hate Trump. I'm never going to pay him this money. That orange turd and she's like trying to make jokes, and it's not being well received by the jury because they're not there. They're spending all of their time there. And that is not a joke to them. They're away from their jobs. They're away from their families. And I think I'm hoping they're just frustrated thinking, what are we here for? What is this case? Like we can't, there's no, there's no case there. If you're actually listening to it, I won't discuss it with people who aren't listening to it and who aren't reading everything, because I'm not going to argue with somebody who's completely uninformed. But it is just a joke. And so hopefully they won't vote to convict him just because they don't like him, because that's the kind of jury you might get in New York. Definitely not a jury of his peers. I think there is one Trump supporter one person on the jury who gets part of his news from Truth Social and part of his news from Fox. And then everybody else is pretty much New York Times. And I mean, they surveyed that at the beginning. So there's that case. Then you've got the Chutkan case, which is on hold. And Chutkan is, the Stormy Daniels case is Bragg, right? Chutkan is that Smith? Engeron was Letitia James, and that thing's going to get overturned on appeal. I can't think of who. I think it's Jack Smith and Chutkan, isn't it? So anyway, Chutkan's case is stalled out because that case is basically before SCOTUS on an immunity thing. The immunity thing is also going to affect Fannie's case, which is falling apart. And Fannie's case is in Georgia, and that is not McAllister. What is that judge's name? I can't remember. But anyway, that one's stalled. And then this week, Eileen Cannon, which is Jack Smith. Jack Smith's the attorney. Eileen Cannon is the judge. That's the Florida case on the documents. And so Jack Smith was forced to admit that he had tampered with the documents, that they had gone through and they had put these confidential cover sheets in the files and then took pictures of those as though there were confidential things there, and there weren't. And so Cannon has just had it, and Cannon's basically put the trial on indefinite hold, and it looks like Jack Smith may be investigated over this for tampering with evidence. So that's where that's all going. I think I got all the cases. You got Chutkan, Cannon, the Fannie Willis thing, Engeron, and the Merchant case, which is Bragg, right? I think that's Bragg, the Stormy Daniels case. I need to write them down. I need some kind of push pin board with little, you know how they do on the crime shows, and they've got yarn going between all of them. It's a hot mess. But anyway, that's what's going on there. And I think that's all of the non-book stuff I had to talk to you guys about. My cats are going nuts. I put a chair here next to me. So Mr. Gray, who is incredibly needy, he's like, why aren't you petting me? I don't understand why you're only petting me with one hand when you have two. And he's still not sleeping through the night. He's like howling during the night. So we're getting no sleep. And then I picked up a cold at the wedding. So there you go. But it was a wedding. What happened to my screen share? Let's fix that. Make sure we can all see that. Oh, for the love of God. Come on. There we go. Oh, and there was a new prayer request today. I was over in Red Pill 78's chat yesterday, and Debbie Roush is one of the mods over there. I think I'm saying her name right. And her son, Cody, is having an MRI today. So if you guys would pray for a good outcome, or for, at least something diagnostically that they can figure out if he's having, I don't know what the story is, but just pray about that. And you guys see I changed my background today. Isn't that nice? I like that. All right, here we go. This is Shane, and it's an old Western book by Jack. Don, I lost my thing. I can't think of his name. Isn't that funny? Hold on. Jack Schaefer. All right. Excuse the voice, guys. Hopefully it'll be better next week. Shane, a Jess Williams Western, 57th in the series by Robert J. Thomas. Is it by Robert J. Thomas, or is it by, I have no idea. Maybe he uses a pen name. Chapter 1. Jess said his goodbyes to everyone at the fishing camp on the lake where the medicine man was born. He stopped in the nearby town of Leslie, Colorado, to meet with the town marshal to see if he had any wanted posters. He was on a little-used trail that would lead him to the town of Wilshire, Colorado, where he hoped to locate the next man on his hunt list, Bernard Blackstone. He was wanted dead or alive for several murders and bank robberies. He had been on the trail for over a week now, and when he saw the town of Wilshire off in the distance... Hey, stop. Sorry, guys. When he saw the town of Wilshire off in the distance, he located a small hill that he could ride to that would give him a good view of the entire town. He scanned it through his spyglass and still marveled at the quality of the small telescope. Things appeared much closer and clearer. He spotted 2 liveries, 2 saloons, 1 general store, and dozens of other buildings and houses scattered around the only street running through the town. He put the spyglass away and nudged Gray into a slow gallop. When he turned the corner along the main street, he watched the rooftops and buildings for any possible threats. He had never hunted any men in the state of Colorado before, but he knew that the dime novels written about him had already reached most states and territories. He rode past the jail that was locked and shuttered. He smiled inwardly as he looked at the wanted posters nailed on the outside walls. Bernard Blackstone's wanted poster was nailed to the door, just below the small barred window. As he rode to the other end of town, where there were 2 liveries, he slid from the saddle and walked his horses inside through the large doors. A short, fat man with an unlit, stubby cigar hanging from his lips turned around at a counter he was working at to see him. The man removed the cigar and jutted his face out. "Am I still drunk, or is that Jess Williams standing right there in my doorway?" "I don't know if you're still drunk, but yeah, I'm Jess Williams." "Didn't think you worked this far west." "I've passed through parts of the state before, but never actually hunted anyone in it. Until now." "Let me guess. You're looking for that no-good sumbitch Bernard Blackstone." "I am." "Well, then you've come to the right place, because he's been coming to town most days of the last month or so," said the man. "He tried to stay out at his pa's place, but he done run him off his property." "His father?" "Yeah, Don Blackstone has a small sod house east of town," he explained. "Used to grow beef, but now all he does is farm the land. That boy was the death of his mother, put her in an early grave on account of what he'd done, killing and robbing banks and the like." "So when does Bernard come into town?" "Mostly after dark. He usually drinks at the Wood Carver. The owner, Mike Kennedy, tolerates him, but no one in town likes his sorry ass. He's caused a lot of trouble, and he's still at it. You want me to take care of your horses?" "Actually, not just yet. I'm going out and talk to his father." "You best make sure he sees you coming, because he's got an itchy trigger finger, and he's a crack shot with that rifle of his." "Thanks for the warning," Jess said as he walked his horses out of the livery and opened his pocket watch. Calculating he had a few hours of daylight left, he climbed back up on the saddle and headed out of town on the trail leading east. It didn't take long to make it to the sod house that was set back from the trail. When he started heading toward it, a rifle cracked loudly. Jess immediately halted his horse and saw a man walk out of the doorway with a rifle in his hands. "State your business," he shouted. "I mean you no harm," he responded. "I'm Jess Williams, and I'm looking for your son, Bernard." "Come closer. Keep your hands away from those weapons you're wearing." Jess started his horse at a slow walk, keeping his hands in plain view, not wanting to give the man a reason to use the rifle. When he reached him, the man began to lower his gun. He looked to be in his late 50s and was dressed in clothes that were obviously soiled from working the huge garden behind his house. The man stepped off the porch and slung the rifle over his shoulder. "Dang if it ain't really you," he said as he shaded his eyes and looked up at him. "If you're looking for that worthless son of mine, he ain't here. I done run him off my property." "I heard he goes to town most nights, but is there somewhere else he might be?" The man lowered his head and scratched his cheek. "To tell you the truth, not really," he said. "He's worthless, but he ain't stupid. He'll usually camp in several different spots so he ain't at the same place 2 nights in a row. He's been dodging the law for years now, and he's gotten pretty good at it, I reckon. Thanks. If he comes back here, would you let me know? He's worthless, but he's still my flesh and blood. I won't help you find him, but I won't get in your way neither. I reckon that's fair enough. You going to kill him when you find him? That's usually how I work, he said, watching the rifle in the man's hands. I suppose it has to happen someday, the man said, as he hung his head. You'll have to take him to the next town for the bounty, though. We haven't had a town marshal in years. I planned on it. What's he worth now? The wanted poster says 2,000. It should be higher, he said, especially with all the wrong he's done to people. I don't do it for the money. I know. I read them dime novels they write about you. Got a dozen of them sitting on my shelf over the fireplace. If you get to talk to him, tell him 2 things for me. What? Tell him I still don't forgive him for putting his ma in an early grave. And tell him I said goodbye. I promise, if I get to speak with him, that is. He tipped his hat at the man, turned his horses around, and headed back to Wilshire. He arrived at the livery an hour before dark. The man there was sitting on a wooden box with the unlit cigar still hanging from his lips. Jess slid from his saddle and handed him the reins to his horses. You ever going to smoke that thing? He asked. The man removed the cigar from his lips and regarded it. Nah, I quit smoking these things a few years back, but I like to keep one in my mouth just in case I get the urge, he said before sticking it between his teeth again. Any rooms for rent in town? Got some at both saloons, but Mike over at the woodcarver has the nicest ones, he said as the cigar bounced up and down. Thanks, said Jess. He grabbed his things and headed out to the livery, walking toward the woodcarver saloon. When he approached it, he saw a neatly carved sign over the door. The letters were carved into the wood and painted with white paint. He saw a carving of a deer on one of the bat wings and a carving of a man holding a rifle and aiming it at the deer on the other bat wing. He walked through the doors and immediately saw the dozen or so wooden statues standing around. All the support posts had carvings on them. The man behind the bar was working on decorating the wall behind him. There were 8 other men in the place, all playing cards and drinking, but none of them was any concern to him. The man behind the bar turned around with a small hammer and a strange-looking tool in his hands. Welcome to the woodcarver, he said in a booming voice. You want to take a guess as to why I named the place that? Jess glanced around again and smiled at the man. How many guesses do I get? The man chuckled. Not hard to figure out, eh? No, I think it's quite obvious, he said as he put his things on a table close to the bar. I'm Mike Kennedy. I own the place, he said as he dropped his tools, reached across the bar, and shook Jess's hand. Jess Williams. And I'm looking for Bernard Blackstone, he said as he removed the wanted poster and placed it on the bar. Kennedy didn't look at it. I know. The owner of the livery came by earlier and told me all about it. Bernard usually comes in after dark, so if he's coming in tonight, he should show up in a few hours. You want a room? Just for one night. $2. Here's the key to the room 3, he said as he handed it to him. He paid the man for the room and headed up the steps, hoping to get in a short nap before having a hot meal. He removed his weapons and fell off to a light sleep, still picturing Red Moon trying to drown himself in the lake. What is that about? I don't think we read that. Hopefully I started at the beginning. A slight smile formed on his lips. He was sleeping lightly when all of a sudden he heard a loud voice booming. Who the hell will challenge me tonight? That was followed by a single gunshot. Jess's eyes snapped open as he got out of the bed, holstering his pistol as he did, leaving the hammer strap off on purpose. Chapter 2. The slug from the saloon's lower level punched a hole in the floor of Jess's room, just inside the door. He examined it as he put the rest of his weapons on, but he couldn't see through the hole well enough to identify anyone. He heard the pounding of feet as some of the men ran out of the place. I believe Bernard Blackstone has arrived, he whispered to himself as he slid his pistol out and cocked it. He opened the door and watched his footsteps cautiously, trying to slowly put his weight down, listening for any creaking and looking for any loose planks, being as quiet as he could. He stepped on the outside edges of the stairs, going down until he could lean over and see into the saloon. 4 men were holding their hands up in the air, and Blackstone stood at the bar sipping whiskey. His pistol was resting on top of the counter. His back was to the stairway, so Jess slowly made it down a few more feet until 2 of the men holding their hands darted their eyes up to him. Blackstone was tipping his head back when he noticed the men looking behind him. He slowly placed the glass on the bar and started moving his right hand toward the pistol. As soon as his hand touched it, Jess spoke. "Not quite ready for you to do that yet," Jess told him in a calm but warning voice. "Who is that behind me?" said Blackstone. "You were asking for a challenge, so I thought I'd come down and give you one, especially seeing as how none of the men in here are healed." "You still didn't tell me who you are yet." "Why don't we let that be a surprise?" Jess said as he finished walking down the stairs. When he walked into view and Blackstone turned his head to see who it was, his features quickly sharpened as he realized his predicament. The men who were holding their hands up in the air slowly lowered them. One of them even smiled a little. "Jess Williams? Why are you in town?" asked Blackstone. "You know you're wanted, dead or alive, don't you?" "Yeah, but I'm only worth $2,000. I heard you only go after the big bounties." "I'm sorry to inform you, but you heard wrong." "You mean you came all the way to Colorado looking for me? I heard you usually stay in Texas." "Seems you've heard a lot of wrong things. Your pa said you weren't stupid." "My pa said that?" "Stopped by his place to let him know I was looking for you and to see if you were there. He don't like me much." "Now that's the first thing you've got right so far," said Jess. The barkeep behind the bar grunted. "Ain't no one likes you much, Bernard," said Kennedy. "Stay out of this, Mike," growled Blackstone. "You're finally getting what's coming to you," pressed Kennedy. "I said to shut your trap," he barked. Jess looked at the whiskey glass on the bar. "You want to finish that?" he asked as he nodded at the whiskey. Blackstone turned his head and looked at it. As a matter of fact, I do." "Go on, then." Blackstone's right hand moved toward the whiskey, but it hesitated for a few seconds when it hovered over his pistol next to the glass. "Just the whiskey," Jess warned him. Blackstone picked up his whiskey and slowly downed it. He set the glass back down on the bar, and when he moved his right hand away, he grabbed the pistol, put his thumb on the hammer, and jerked it off the bar. He swiveled his hand as he started cocking it, but the slug that rammed into his side caused him to throw his pistol off to the right. He bounced off the edge of the bar and stumbled a few feet before dropping to his knees in front of Jess. He grabbed his side with his hand. "You done shot me dead," he wailed. "Not yet," said Jess as he cocked the pistol again. "Your pa wanted me to give you 2 messages before you passed on." "What?" he asked as his lip began to quiver. "He's never forgiven you for putting your ma in an early grave, and he said goodbye and good riddance." That's 3 messages," he moaned. "I know. That third one was just from me," he said as he pulled the trigger. The slug blew Blackstone's evil heart apart, and he fell forward onto the dusty saloon floor. One man in the saloon started slowly clapping his hands together, followed by the others, until they were all clapping, including Kennedy behind the bar. "Not one man in town will miss that pile of cow dung," said the barkeep as he grabbed a bottle of whiskey and began pouring glasses of it. "One free drink for everyone in the place to celebrate." The men cheered and clapped louder as they went to the bar one by one and picked up a glass. Jess watched the men in the saloon as he replaced the spent shells in his pistol and holstered it. He walked to the bar, and the barkeep shoved a glass of whiskey in front of him. He shook his head. "I can't drink that coffin varnish," he said as politely as he could. The barkeep reached below the counter and brought up a bottle of expensive rye whiskey. Hold on, just checking on comments here. Hi, Penny. I'm going to attend by recording. Slept in. Hey, that's okay. Lynn Arneson. Good morning, my friend. All right, back to it. Jess plunked a $20 gold eagle on the bar. I'll buy the bottle, and you can pour everyone in here a drink on me, he said as the barkeep poured him a glass of rye. The barkeep raised the bottle in the air. Another free drink on the man who rid us of the biggest problem our town has ever faced, he said as he waved the bottle around. The men cheered again and came with empty glasses to get them refilled. Jess paid 2 men to throw Blackstone's corpse over his horse and take him to the livery with instructions for the owner to watch the body overnight for a fee. He got something hot to eat and headed up to his room, making mental notes of the boards that creaked when he stepped on them. Down at the livery, the owner was lazily strapping Blackstone's body to his horse. He heard a noise and turned around to see 2 men standing in the shadows of the large door. Hi, good morning, Summer. It's okay, you're all right for being late. Jess just killed a bad guy, and he's getting ready to take a nap. That's about where we are. The time difference is always confusing. One of them he heard a noise and turned around to see 2 men standing in the shadows of the large doors. One of them walked closer to where the body was. Who you strapping down? He asked. Oh, this? This is Bernard Blackstone. He got himself shot dead tonight over at the woodcarver. Is that so? Asked the man as he walked over to the body and lifted his head. He glanced up at his partner and grinned, exposing, you can't walk on the keyboard, Mr. Gray, exposing 2 gold teeth in the front of his mouth. You thinking what I'm thinking? He asked his partner. Yeah, we's all run out of cash. Who are you men, and what do you want with this body? That corpse is worth $2,000, said the man as his lips slowly curled up into a sneer. Maybe, but you need to know who killed. His sentence was interrupted by something hard crashing down on the back of his head. The man who had pistol whipped him stood behind him when he slumped to the ground, unconscious. We'd better finish tying the body down and shin on out of here, he said. Good thinking, partner, said the other man as they quickly finished the job and walked the horse out of the livery. They climbed up in the saddle and walked their horse behind the livery until they disappeared from view in the darkness of the night. Jess woke in the morning and headed downstairs as he took in the aroma of coffee and bacon cooking. Over a dozen people were eating eggs, bacon, ham, and biscuits the size of a small plate. A long, wide board set on the top of the bar had slabs of butter, jars of preserves, and a huge bowl of milk gravy on it. Kennedy walked out of the back room carrying 2 platters of food. He dropped them on a table and turned to Jess. I cook a great breakfast every morning, he said boastfully. What would you like? How about 3 eggs, yellow side up, bacon, and I'll take one of those biscuits. I'll bring it out shortly. Help yourself to the coffee over there, he said as he pointed to several pots of coffee and a large pitcher of milk on one of the tables. Jess was finishing with his breakfast when the livery owner ran through the batwing doors, holding the back of his head. His eyes scanned the saloon until they settled on Jess. He ran over to his table. They took the body last night, he stammered as he rubbed his head. Jess put his fork down and wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin. You mean Blackstone's body? One of them knocked me out, and when I finally woke up this morning, the body was gone. Can you describe the men? Well, it was dark, but both of them was skinny, and both had handlebar mustaches that hung down below their chins. Oh, and they knew exactly how much the body was worth. $2,000, they said. And one of them said they was all out of cash. Jess searched his memory, and it slowly came to him. They must be bounty hunters, and not very good ones, he recalled. And if they both had long handlebar mustaches, they must be Og and Denoyer. There's some names. Augie and Denoyer. Those 2 would steal a crutch from a blind woman if they thought they could sell it for a nickel. I looked outside the doors this morning, and 3 sets of tracks rode around and behind my livery, and then they headed northeast," said the man. "I'll bet they headed to Fannin to turn the body in for the bounty." "How far is Fannin?" asked Jess. "A day's ride, maybe more if you're not traveling fast." Jess dug into his pocket and handed the livery owner $10. He looked at the money and frowned. "What's this for?" "Payment for guarding the body last night." "But I didn't guard anything. I was on the ground out cold all night and lost the body." Jess stood up, put his hand on the man's shoulder, and smiled knowingly. "That body ain't lost. I'll find it and get it back," he said. "Now go and get your head looked at." "Don't have too far to go. The doc is stuffing his face with food," he said, pointing to a man sitting with a woman. Jess looked at him, taking a huge bite of ham. "You might have to wait until he's finished," he said. "He looks mighty hungry." "Might as well go ahead and eat," said the livery owner as he headed for the table with the coffee on it. Jess went up to his room, retrieved his things, and headed for the livery, but not before taking one of the biscuits with him. He saddled his horses and rode out, following the 3 sets of tracks until he saw where they turned onto a trail heading northeast. He stopped his horses and took a drink of water. He corked the canteen and patted Gray on his neck. "Come on, boy. We got to track down 2 knuckle-headed bounty hunters," he said as he urged Gray into a fast gallop, constantly watching the trail and everything around him. Chapter 3. Jess followed the tracks for about 5 miles until they veered off the trail. He followed them to a bunch of thick, heavy bushes where he found a small, cold fire and 2 empty cans on the ground. He saw where they had tethered the horses for the night. He slid from the saddle, bent down, and picked up one of the cans. "Beans," he whispered. "Only 2 cans, so they must be running low on supplies." He climbed up in the saddle and followed the tracks back out to the trail leading to Fannin, estimating he could make it there before dusk and hopefully in time to find Augie and Denoyer there waiting to get paid for the body they took. Again, if you're arriving late, I apologize for the voice. I caught a cold at the wedding this weekend. Hopefully by next Wednesday we'll sound better. The 2 downtrodden bounty hunters rode into Fannin in the early afternoon. They went to the jail and climbed out of the saddle. A middle-aged man walked out wearing a marshal's badge and a despicable look on his chiseled face. He recognized the 2 bounty hunters immediately. He glanced behind them at the corpse tied across the saddle. "Don't tell me you 2 idiots actually caught one," he said. "Now why you gotta be like that, Marshal?" railed Augie. "Because you 2 have been bounty hunting for 5 years now, and this is the first time I've seen you bring someone in." "Now, that ain't exactly true, Marshal," complained Denoyer. "We brought in, he counted on his fingers as he went deep into thought. 1, 2, 3. Oh, wait a minute. That one didn't count because he got loose and robbed us. Yeah, it was 3. The marshal shook his head and gave Denoyer a skeptical look. "You can't count all the way to 4, can you?" he asked. "You don't have to insult me because I'm stupid," he harped. "I don't have to count to 4 because my partner there can count all the way up to, what is it, partner?" Augie smiled wittily. "All the way up to 7, I think," he said. The marshal huffed, walked over to the body, and lifted the head to identify who it was. He dropped it and turned back around to them. "This is Bernard Blackstone," he said. "What'd he do, kill himself?" "No, we shot him," defended Augie. "You 2. You tracked him down and killed him." "Well, yeah," announced Augie, trying to act as convincing as he could about it. "Blackstone was as cagey as they come and faster than desert lightning," scoffed the marshal. "Sorry, I got that wrong." "Well, we done put an end to that now, didn't we?" bragged Denoyer. "You couldn't have done this. Not you 2. "We gots the body, so you gotta pay us the bounty," said Augie as he waved his hands around. "You got paper on him?" asked the marshal. Augie rifled through his saddlebags until he found the wanted poster. He handed it to the marshal and grinned. "See there? Says he's worth 2,000. The marshal cut the horse loose. You'll have to stay in town overnight, he said. I can't get the money until tomorrow. But Marshall, we don't even have money for rooms, protested Augie. Can't you at least pay us a few bucks and take it out of the bounty money? The marshal walked into his office and returned with $20. He handed it to Augie. I'm taking $40 out of the bounty money tomorrow, he said, as he grabbed the rope to the horse again and headed toward the undertaker's parlor. 40, hollered Augie. Ain't that twice as much? Figure it out, he said, without turning around. Denoyer can count to 3 and you can count to 7. Between the two of you, you might figure it out by tomorrow. But I doubt it. The marshal walked away, leaving them trying to figure if it was twice or not. Jess rode into Fannin about an hour before dark. He headed straight for the jail. The marshal was walking across the street from one of the saloons when he saw him riding in. And when he saw him riding in, he put his hands on his hips and stood there waiting until he reached him. What in tarnation is Jess Williams doing all the way out in Colorado, he asked. Trying to find the 2 bounty hunters who stole the dead body of Bernard Blackstone, he said, as he slid from the saddle. The marshal looked over at the saloon again, and then he smiled widely. Augie and Denoyer, that's such a hard name to say, Denoyer, we're going to call him, he asked. Yeah, they leave town yet? No, they're over at the saloon drinking with some of the money I advanced them, since they didn't have enough money for a room, he said, chuckling. They think they're getting $2,000 tomorrow. You want to break the news to them, or do you want me to do it? No, I'll give them the bad news, Jess said as he stretched and started walking his horses to the saloon. The marshal laughed and ran ahead of him, wanting to see the looks on their faces. He walked inside the saloon before Jess. Augie looked up at him and grinned. Did you get our money already? He asked. No, but I found someone who's looking for you, he said as Jess pushed through the bat wings. Augie and Denoyer stood up, and Jess's hand dropped to his pistol. I can't believe there's a Jess and Augie in this, says Jess. That's my man's name. Oh, that is so funny. What are the chances? That's great. Oh, your man's name is Augie. I love that. Okay, Augie and Denoyer stood up, and Jess's hand dropped to his pistol. What's he doing here? Demanded Augie. Ask him, said the marshal. I'm sure he's just dying to tell you. Jess gave them both a critical look, which made them slowly sit down, keeping their hands on the table in plain view. He walked to the bar and ordered a good whiskey. My name is Breyer, the marshal said as he shook hands. What brought you to Colorado? Actually, I was escorting a Cheyenne medicine man and woman by the name of Maggie to a lake near the town of Leslie so he could meet his final destiny. I'm on my way back to Texas, and when I saw the poster on Blackstone, I figured I might as well go after him since it was on my way. Did the medicine man meet his destiny? I'm not sure, he said as he crooked his head in thought. He tried to drown himself twice, and I stopped him when he tried to do it a third time. How'd you do that? I shot him. You killed a Cheyenne medicine man? No, I just clipped his shoulder, but it was enough to keep him from trying again. Maybe his destiny was to meet Maggie and get married to her, but he just didn't know it. So what are you going to do about these two? He asked as he nodded at Augie and Denoyer, who were sitting like school kids waiting for the teacher to rap their knuckles with a board. Jess looked over at him pitifully. I'm not sure yet, he sighed. They look like they've been wearing the same set of clothes for the last 10 years. Holes in their hats, torn shirts and pants. I'll bet there ain't no walking leather on the bottom of their boots either. I found their camp from last night. It looks like they shared a can of beans for supper and another can for their morning meal. Those two are a couple sad-looking bounty hunters. Well, they did bring the body in, said the marshal. Jess took a sip of his whiskey and started for the table where the two men waited nervously. The marshal said you two turned the body in, which means you have a legal claim to the money. But you know you didn't kill him, because I did. We don't know that for sure, said Augie. We never saw you kill Blackstone. Well, you two certainly didn't. Then it looks like we got ourselves a Mexican standoff, said Augie. Jess reached down and pulled a cartridge out of the bullet loops on each of their holsters and examined them. How about that, he said. What? Asked Augie. You both carry a .38 caliber handgun. So, said Augie, Blackstone was killed with 45 caliber slugs. How do you know that? Demanded Denoyer. These guys are so stupid. Because I killed him with this, he said as he tapped his unique pistol. Yeah, well, a lot of men carry 45 leg irons, argued Augie. Maybe, but I have a dozen witnesses who saw the shooting, said Jess. I'm sure we can all take a ride to Wilshire and talk to them, especially the owner of the livery, who you two knocked out before you took Blackstone's body. He can identify you both, especially with those long mustaches. Their shoulders visibly sunk as they lowered their heads. Dang it, said Denoyer. We should have let that livery man tell us who killed him. Yeah, if we'd have known it was you, we wouldn't have taken the body, added Augie. So now what? Jess dropped the 2 cartridges on the table and looked back and forth between the 2 of them. Put your boots under your chair and show me the soles, he told them. They took on confused attitude, but they did as they were told. Jess walked behind each of them, shaking his head. Augie, both your socks have holes in them, and Denoyer, your socks are filthy. That's 'cause we couldn't spend what money we had on clothes or boots, said Denoyer, as he finished ripping off the front pocket of his shirt that was hanging by a few threads. Both men took on surly and forlorn looks of utter dismay. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, said Jess. I'll split the bounty with the 2 of you so you can get back on your feet. But if you ever try that again, I promise you, it won't go well. Their 2 heads snapped to attention. You will? They said in unison. Yeah, but first, you need to take my horses to the livery, brush them down and feed them some grain, he told them. The 2 men stood up. Which ones are yours? Asked Augie. Those 2, fine-looking horses right outside, he said, pointing to Gray and Sharps. Jess watched as the 2 rushed out of the saloon. Augie grabbed the reins to Gray, and Denoyer grabbed Sharp's bridle. Both horses used their heads to push the 2 away. Augie tried again, and Gray swung his neck around, knocking him down in the dusty street. Denoyer was now hauling on the reins to Sharps, trying to pull his neck to one side from behind. Sharps turned his head around, letting Denoyer get a few more feet behind him. Then he lifted his left hoof and slammed it into his chest, knocking him out in the middle of the street. A wagon hauling some lumber had to make a quick stop to avoid running him over. I like this Jess character, me too. Augie ran over and helped him up. Damn horses are stubborn like mules, he said as Denoyer brushed himself off and rubbed his chest. The 2 cautiously walked over to the horses again. Jess went back to the bar, picked up his whiskey, and took another sip of it. Breyer saw Augie hitting the dirt for a second time. He looked over at Jess. When are you going to tell them that those horses won't budge without you? He asked. After I finish my whiskey, he said, as Denoyer hit the dirt after Sharps ripped his right shirt sleeve off with his teeth. You better drink fast before they get themselves killed out there. Jess turned at the bar and watched Augie hitting the boardwalk. I reckon so, but it's kind of fun watching them try, don't you think? Maybe they'll learn a lesson this time, chuckled the marshal. Somehow, I doubt it, muttered Jess as he walked to the Batwings to tell them to leave the horses alone. I agree, said the marshal as he saw Jess helping Augie up off the boardwalk and handing him some money. Vicky Carlton, good morning, my friend. We're in chapter 4, so if you got here late, you'll have to watch part of that on rewind. Where's my... We had this guy, just real quick. Oh, no, I told you about this guy last week, the Where's My Cakes guy. That's what that reminded me of. Chapter 4. Jess was sitting at a table in the saloon, eating a bowl of beef stew, when Augie and Denoyer walked in wearing new clothes, boots, and hats. Both had traded in their pistols and holsters for new ones, opting for shiny nickel-plated Colt Peacemakers. They walked over to him, smiling happily. We got all new duds with that money you gave us, said Augie. We even took baths and got haircuts, beamed Denoyer as he stroked his trimmed mustache. I see you both bought new Colt peacemakers, too, said Jess as he put the spoon down. Yup, said Augie, 45 caliber. Do you mind if we sit with you? Asked Denoyer. No, he said as he pushed a chair out with his boot. The two sat down and waved at the barkeep to get them some of the stew. So you headed back to Texas now? Asked Augie. Yeah, why? You going to do any more bounty hunting along the way? Asked Denoyer. Not really sure, he said. I'll be taking a look at any wanted posters the marshal has, and if there's someone who needs killing along the route back, I might head in their direction. Why? Why? Do you want me to leave Colorado to you two? That ain't what we's getting at, said Denoyer. Jess spooned some more stew into his mouth and chewed it while looking back and forth at the two. He swallowed and put the spoon back in the bowl. He took a sip of his coffee and leaned back in his chair. All right, one of you spit it out, he said. Augie leaned forward and put his elbows on the table. Well, we know of these two wanted men who are worth $10,000 apiece, and we think we know where they's hiding, he said. We was wondering if you'd like to join up with us and go after them. Why don't the two of you go after them and keep all the money for yourselves? Because these two are vicious killers, said Augie, and they like to torture people before they kill them. I think I can handle taking a bullet, but I don't want to die slowly like that. Then don't give them the chance, explained Jess. If they're as bad as you claim, just wait for them to show themselves and plug them with rifles. Well, that's just something neither of us can do, admitted Augie. Denoyer nodded his head in agreement. Yeah, we ain't the smartest, but we got religion and just can't kill a man without warning, admitted Denoyer. Then why are you two in the business of hunting wanted men? We tried other jobs, but like I said, we ain't smart. And whenever we got hired on to other work, we got fired after the first few days, said Denoyer. Yeah, like the time we was hired to do fencing, said Augie. We didn't bury the post as deep as we was supposed to, and the fencing fell down before we got the first stretch finished. Or like the time we was hired to look out for rustlers, and we both fell asleep and lost 30 head before we woke up, added Denoyer as he looked at Augie. And remember the time we was hired to fix the roof on that house? You fell off and was laid up for a month. Broke my arm and couldn't walk much on my left foot for the longest time, he chuckled. Yeah, and how about the time? All right, I get it, said Jess, as he put his hand up to stop Denoyer from finishing. Anyway, we took up bounty hunting because it was something we could do, but we don't make much doing it, lamented Denoyer. But if we could catch those two and split the money with you, well, that'd give us each 5,000, and that's a lot of money for us. I don't know, said Jess. He slowly shook his head. They say you're the best at doing this, and you've caught a whole passel of the worst killers in Texas, said Augie. And you're smart enough to come up with a plan to catch those two. Yeah, but I'm also smart enough not to let you two get me killed, he said, as 2 bowls of stew were delivered to the table. Who are these 2 men anyway? Well, we don't want to tell you, lest you go after them on your own, said Augie. Jess cocked his head and gave them a shrewd look. And what makes you think I couldn't do that anyway? He asked. I'm sure the marshal has copies of the wanted posters on them in his office. Both of them slowly shook their heads. I'll bet he don't, said Augie. The wanted posters we have are 3 years old, and we haven't seen any new ones lately. I think after a while they'll quit printing them. Or they quit printing them. That does happen sometimes. But I have connections in the United States Marshal's Division, and they can find out if I was interested. But we know where they might be hiding, bragged Denoyer. Then head on out tomorrow and look for them after you get paid. But we need your help, said Augie. Jess hesitated for a long moment as he looked back and forth between the two. I'm not saying yes, but I'll think about it and let you know tomorrow, he said as he finished his meal and stood up. Right now, I'm going up to take a nap. The two of them watched him walk up the stairs of the saloon. Augie turned to his partner. I don't think he's going to help us. Well, we did try to steal his bounty, said Denoyer. Yeah, we did, didn't we? We can't do it by ourselves, So if he doesn't help, we'll be eating beans and having to hunt for most of our meat. I reckon, but not until the money we's getting tomorrow runs out, said Augie. 1,000 should last a long time. Maybe we'll get lucky and find us another easy bounty. Yeah, let's hope for that, Augie said, as he stuck his spoon in the stew. Jess woke from his nap a few hours later. He heard the sounds of a tinkling piano downstairs, and from all the muffled voices, the saloon was obviously busy. He splashed some water on his face and wiped it with a towel. He put his guns on and opened his door, and his left hand as he stood to the side. Opened his door with his left hand as he stood to the side. He saw the hallway was empty, so he walked out and closed the door. When he walked downstairs, he saw Augie and Denoyer sitting at a table playing cards with a man who was dressed in a light gray business suit with a vest. He was clean-shaven and had his dark gray Stetson sitting on the table by his left hand. His dark mustache looked like it was penciled on, and his goatee was neatly trimmed. It was a half-inch wide and ran all the way under his chin. Jess slipped his hammer strap off and headed for the one end of the bar where Marshall Breyer stood talking to one of the barkeeps. Jess ordered a bottle of fine Kentucky whiskey and offered some to Breyer. He took a sip and smiled. Ah, Kentucky makes the finest whiskey around, he said. Don't forget Tennessee, Jess said, grinning as he looked over at the table where they were playing cards. They're spending their money already, said Jess. Yep, and that's Colorado Dan they're playing with. He'll empty their pockets. Colorado Dan? I forgot you're not from around these parts, said Breyer. He hails from the big city of Denver. Professional gambler and gunslinger. Hopefully he doesn't know who you are. Why? You think you'll be trouble? Not sure, he said. I suppose it depends on how much he drinks. Well, at least I only gave them $100. They'll still have some money left tomorrow. Breyer grunted and chuckled. Don't be so sure about that. Colorado Dan came over and had me confirm that they're getting paid $1,000 tomorrow. I did, and he gave them each $400 to play with. He did? Yeah, and by the looks of it, they ain't doing so well. Knuckleheads, muttered Jess as he put his glass down and headed toward their table. I don't know if I'd go over. Breyer didn't finish. He just grunted and poured some more of the whiskey in his glass. Colorado Dan immediately picked up on the fact that someone was coming his way, and his eyes locked on Jess's. When he saw that the hammer strap on Jess's pistol was removed, he quickly moved his left hand to the top of his Stetson. Jess weaved his way around people until he was standing next to Augie, who was looking at his cards. What are you two doing gambling with money you haven't even received yet? He asked. Augie, who looked up at him. We's hoping to double our money since we didn't think you'd go along with us tomorrow. And you thought gambling against a professional was the best way to do it? I thought so, said Augie. Colorado Dan moved the Stetson closer to the edge of the table, and Jess moved his right hand closer to the butt of his pistol as he snapped his head over at him. You reach for the derringer in that hat, you die, he said calmly. Colorado Dan grinned and moved the hat back on the table. Why, sir, I should take that as an insult to my integrity, he said with a heavy southern drawl. It wasn't an insult, just a warning. I don't think we've had the pleasure of being introduced properly. That there is Jess Williams, the best bounty hunter west of the Big Muddy, claimed Augie. The gambler stood up and stuck his hand out to Jess. I'm Colorado Dan, but you can just call me Dan, he said as Jess shook his hand. You ain't from around this area, are you? No, I do most of my work in Texas and Kansas, and sometimes in New Mexico territory. That's a strange-looking leg iron you got there, he said as he looked at it. You any good with it? I reckon. Do you need all those guns to hunt men? I do. Seems a bit much. Never run out of guns or the ammunition for them is what I believe, said Jess. Besides, you have a derringer tucked in the top of that Stetson. You have another one strapped to your left forearm, most likely spring-loaded, one in the inside pocket of that vest, and the Navy Colt on your right hip, turned backward. Don laughed softly. You're quite the observant fella. I have to be in my line of work. Augie looked up from his cards excitedly. Can we get back to the game? I think I got me a winning hand, he declared. Jess stared at Dan for a long moment before turning around and making his way back to the bar where Briar stood, watching. I think Colorado Dan is eyeballing you a little too much, he cautioned. Maybe you should turn in early, before he gets any more whiskey in his gut. Marshall, I don't make my decisions in life based on what other people are thinking, he said, as he poured himself another drink and watched Augie and Denoyer throw their cards down on the table. Colorado Dan raked in the pot as he smiled at the two. Those two are going to end up drunk and out of money by morning, chuckled Briar. Chapter 5. We are moving right along. I don't know how many chapters this book has. Let's look. Chapter 20. All right. How do I close that? There we go. Colorado Dan kept steadily winning, letting Denoyer and Augie win the small pots to keep their hopes up and keep them in the game. After a few hours, the two bounty hunters stood up with dejected looks on their faces. They strolled over to where Jess and the marshal were standing. Dang our bad luck, muttered Augie. If you have bad luck at playing poker, why did you play against him? Asked Jess. We figured maybe our luck had changed after you said you'd split the bounty with us, said Denoyer with a hopeful look on his face. You're still splitting it with us, ain't you? What if I've changed my mind after watching you lose money you didn't have? Well, if we can't pay him by tomorrow, he'll most likely kill us, said Augie. Are you sure of that? Said Jess. He done said as much, admitted Denoyer. You did lose the money to him fair and square, declared the marshal. I think he was cheating, but I was afraid to challenge him on it, said Denoyer. Do you have enough to pay for your rooms tonight? Asked Jess. We already paid for him before we got into the game, said Augie. Do either of you have any money left? Asked Jess. I got $3.02, replied Augie. $6.50, said Denoyer, as he looked at the change in his hand. You two don't have bad luck. You just keep doing stupid things, declared Jess. They both shook their heads and ordered some whiskey. Are you still going to give them their share tomorrow? Asked the marshal. I have to. I already told them I would, and I'm a man of my word, he said. Hey, Jess Williams, shouted Colorado Dan from the table he sat at, shuffling the deck. Jess craned his head around and looked at him. The din in the saloon lowered as people started looking over at Colorado Dan. What? Asked Jess. Why don't you come on over and play a few hands with me? The marshal elbowed him lightly. He's been drinking pretty heavily, he warned Jess. Maybe it'd be better to send a bottle of whiskey to his table and let him get so drunk he'll pass out. Nah, he can afford to buy his own whiskey, said Jess, as he looked over at Colorado Dan, who was sitting there with his hands out to his sides, palms up, and an expectant look on his face. I don't gamble, Jess told him bluntly. Dan's hands fell to his sides as a cunning look splashed across his face. Oh, come now, he said. You gamble with your life every time you go up against a man. Tell me, what's the difference? Maybe I look at it a little differently. When you go after a man and you kill him, I'm trying to see who's reading that. Okay, that's Dan. When you go after a man and you kill him, you win the bounty money. But if he kills you, you lose your life. Now, if you gamble with me, all you lose is money, unless I catch you cheating. Then you'd lose your life. Did I hear a threat somewhere in all of that? Did you? Why don't you just play against yourself? Because it's you I want, Mr. Jess Williams, he said. Those two losers told me all about the great bounty hunter who has never been beaten in a gunfight and how you're so fast a man can't see you draw that fancy pistol of yours. I've never set eyes on you before today, so I've never seen you draw. But I say it's a bunch of hooey. I say you can be beat. Oh, it's okay, Jess. You can catch the rest later. Yep, he's stewed, said the marshal. I think you're right, agreed Jess. Both Denoyer and Augie were turned at the bar, watching Dan nervously. "We was just bragging on you," said Augie when he glanced at Jess. "We didn't mean to start anything." "You didn't," said Jess. "He's been thinking on this since he first met me. I saw it in his eyes. Men like that are always trying to prove something." Jess moved a little closer to Dan's table, keeping his right hand by the butt of his pistol. The men in the saloon moved aside to clear a path. The tinkling of the piano slowed and then stopped. "I'll tell you what, Colorado Dan," said Jess. "Why don't you sleep on it and decide tomorrow when you're thinking clearly?" "Are you insinuating that I'm daft?" "No, but maybe the whiskey is doing your thinking for you." Dan's mouth opened, but nothing came out right away. After a few long, tense moments, he slowly rose from his chair. "Why, sir, that is the second time today that you have insulted my integrity, and I will not stand for any more of it," he exclaimed. "I want your two friends over there to pay their debt in full immediately." Augie and Denoyer both glared at Dan. "You know we can't pay you till tomorrow," blurted Augie as he waved his hand around and spilled his whiskey on the boots of the man standing next to him. The man gave him an angry look. "Keep that whiskey in your glass, mister, or I'll shove it down your throat," he warned. "Sorry, it was an accident," Augie said as he set the glass back down on the bar. Jess smiled at Dan. "When you loaned them the money, you knew full well they couldn't pay it back until tomorrow," he told Dan. "Yeah, but that was before you insulted me. If they're friends of yours, I demand my payment in full right now," he said as he jutted out his jaw. "They're not friends of mine, but how about I pay you the money and I'll keep their share tomorrow," he suggested. "You'll be square and we can all go to sleep tonight." "I don't want your money. I want theirs," he spat angrily. "And I think you're being unreasonable about it." Dan started the movement of raising his left hand, and Jess cocked his head and grinned. "If I even think you're making a move to slide that derringer out, I'll plug right where you stand. You have my word on it." Dan stopped his left hand and slowly lowered it. "I don't need a derringer. I got this Navy Colt right here," he said as he tapped the butt that rested forward in the holster. Jess let out a long, frustrated breath. "If you're going to pull that smoke wagon, pull it," he said directly. "If not, quit talking and sit back down." Colorado Dan's face reddened as he moved away from the table. A few more men in the saloon moved out of the line of fire. "You, sir, have insulted me for the very last time," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm going to put a bullet straight through your heart." "Then do it. I'm tired of listening to you talk." The gambler moved his neck around and tightened and loosened his right hand several times. He moved his feet farther apart and steadied himself. He stared at Jess, trying to read him, but all he saw looking back at him was a darkness that loomed in the back of his eyes. His right index finger began tapping the butt of the Navy Colt. Every tap slowed down until it stopped. He slowly turned his wrist inward and his fingers wrapped loosely around the butt of his pistol. His thumb touched the hammer and a slight smile curled up at the corner of his lips. Both men stood stone still, staring at one another. It all happened so fast that some of the men in the saloon didn't even see it. Colorado Dan's right eye twitched ever so slightly as he jerked his pistol out, cocking it as he did. The slug from Jess's pistol slammed into his chest, stunning him and causing him to drop his pistol right after it fired. The slug from Dan's pistol punched a hole in the floor several feet in front of him. He wobbled a few times as he looked around at the crowd, seeing the look of disbelief in their eyes. He slowly turned his head back to Jess, who stood there with his cocked pistol in his hand. Dan dropped to his knees and held his chest with both hands. "It would seem I owe you an apology, Mr. Williams," he said in a thin, weak voice. "I've never seen a man slick a gun out that fast. I was certain I could beat you. Well, you're a gambler, And you just lost your last bet, Jess told him. Dan's eyes slowly fell to his left hand as a sly smile formed on his bloody lips. Don't even try it unless you're in a hurry to get to hell, advised Jess. Dan moved his left hand from his chest, but before he could trigger the spring-loaded Derringer hidden inside the sleeve of his suit jacket, Jess fired again. The slug punched a hole in Dan's forehead. His head snapped back and then forward as he fell face down on the saloon floor, dead. Jess walked over to his body as he replaced the 2 spent shells in his pistol and holstered it. He looked at all the money on the table. The din in the saloon went from hushed whispers to loud voices in a matter of seconds, and the piano started up again. Augie and Denoyer walked over and looked at the dead body. Man, that was really something, said Augie. Yeah, agreed Denoyer. You're as fast as they say you are. I never saw anything like that before. Looks like you don't have to pay him back ever, said Jess as Marshal Breyer strolled over. I can't believe it, said the marshal. Colorado Dan shot dead in my town by none other than Jess Williams. What about all the money? Asked Augie as he ogled the pile of cash on the table next to the gray Stetson. I'll take it and lock it up in my safe, said the marshal. If no one comes to claim his things, it'll go to the town. How about we take our share back from it? Asked Augie as he looked hopefully at the marshal. He loaned you 2 the money you lost, so you have no claim to it, said Breyer. Augie shrugged his shoulders and smiled. Can't blame a man for trying, he said. This is a great read. I have never read a Western novel before. This is supposedly one of the best Western novels of all time. Lonesome Dove is supposed to be really good too, but it is long. Like that would be one that we would need to take the summer to read. Maybe we'll do it. I don't know. Oh, and I noticed in the show last Wednesday, I was talking about reading Tom Sawyer, like I was going to read it next, and I got it confused with Shane. So if you came today expecting Tom Sawyer, I apologize. But we will get to that book. I do love this older literature. It's nice. It's pure. There's not a bunch of, it's kind of like trying to watch TV nowadays. You try to watch TV and they're just shoving every agenda down your throat, and it's just exhausting. Don and I watch, older movies, older TV, because we just can't take it anymore. So it's nice to read a book that is just set in a different time. It's just, I can see it all happening in my head. I'm really, really enjoying it. Okay, chapter 6. What time is it? 11:43. I'll see if I can go till 12:30. My throat's pretty sore, so we may stop at 12, but we're making great progress through this. The next morning found Jess sitting in the front office of the jail, looking over the wanted posters that Breyer had. Breyer had divided up the bounty money after taking $40 out of it. Jess saw 2 wanted posters that caught his attention right off. He was reading them, and Breyer noticed his interest. Those 2 are cold-blooded killers, said Breyer. I'm reading the list of crimes. It's a long one. Dave Ulrich is the older of the 2, he said. James Persault is young enough to be Ulrich's son, but I don't think those 2 came out of a womb. I think the devil sent them here to raise holy hell. They did a really good job of it until a few years ago. Some think they headed down to Mexico, maybe even as far as South America. No one has seen hide nor hair of either of them for quite some time now. They stopped printing wanted posters on them, but I've kept a copy just in case they ever show up again. I'm thinking these must be the 2 men that Augie and Denoyer told me about, said Jess as he put the wanted poster back on the desk. What'd they tell you? If these are the same 2, they think they know where they are, but they won't tell me. Don't tell me they're thinking about going after these 2, he said as he nodded at the wanted posters. No, they said they wouldn't go without my help. First smart thing those 2 have ever done, he said. They'd get themselves killed if they did. Ulrich and Persault are cagey and ruthless, which is why no one has ever found them and lived to tell about it. You thinking about going after them? Not sure yet, he said as he picked up one of the posters again and read it. Augie and Denoyer came walking in with big smiles on their faces that vanished as soon as they saw Jess looking at the wanted poster on Ulrich. "How'd you get your hands on that?" asked Augie. Jess dropped the wanted poster on the desk and looked up at them. "The marshal here had them in his desk." "Ah, hell," said Augie as he plopped down in the chair next to Jess. "You going after 'em?" "So these are the two men you talked about?" asked Jess. "Yeah, that's them," replied Augie. "Marshall thinks they're way down in Mexico or South America," said Jess. "No, they ain't," said Augie as the smile returned to his face. "Then where?" asked Jess. "We ain't telling unless you agree to take us along," said Denoyer. "If you don't, we'll just keep looking for someone good enough to go with us." "Having him with you two is your best bet at staying alive," said Briar as he nodded at Jess. "I know that," said Augie. "That's why we's been trying to get him to agree to work with us on it." "If they're in Mexico or South America, I'm not going all the way down there," said Jess. Denoyer leaned up against the wall and shook his head. "We think they're right here in Colorado," he said. "Then how come no one has laid eyes on them for the last few years?" asked Briar. "Because they've been hiding deep inside a heavily wooded area," said Denoyer. "So deep that you can't ride a horse all the way to where they are." "Have you seen them?" said Jess. "Well, no, but we talked to someone who used to ride with them, and he's been out there before," explained Augie. "And why would he tell you where they are?" asked Briar. "Because they turned on him," said Augie. "They cut all his fingers off and told him never to come back. I think the only reason he told us was because he was angry about what they'd done to him, plus the $20 we gave him since he had no money for whiskey. So you going to join us?" "No," said Jess. "I knew he was going to say that," wailed Denoyer. "I just knew it." "But I'll let you two come with me as long as you agree that I'm leading the hunt," he said plainly. "You listen to me and do what I say, or I'll leave you on your own." "We agree," said Augie without even looking at Denoyer. "Looks like we have us a new partner," said Denoyer. "We're not partners," Jess quickly clarified. "We're only doing this one thing. We're going after Ulrich and Persold, and the day we split the money is the day we split ways." "All right," agreed Augie. "Now take your share of the bounty and make sure you purchase extra ammunition for your pistols and rifles," he said. "I'll meet you two at the livery after I gather my things." The two grabbed their share of the money and ran out. Jess folded the wanted posters and stuck them in his front pocket. Briar leaned back in his chair and smiled as he clasped his hands together behind his head. "Good luck handling those two," he said. "I think I'm going to need it," said Jess as he stood up, shook hands with him, and walked out of the office. Briar watched him through the window by his desk. "Yep, you're going to need it," he muttered to himself. Jess gathered his things and headed to the livery to get his horses ready. Augie and Denoyer were waiting there for him. After that, they walked their horses to the general store and packed their saddlebags full of food supplies, including a smoked ham that Augie stuffed into his saddlebags. They climbed up in the saddle, and Jess sat there looking at the two for a few moments before one of them spoke. "What?" asked Augie. "I was just thinking that this might be a good time for one of you to tell me which direction we're heading," said Jess. "Oh," said Augie. "We head east and slightly south until we come to the area they're hiding in." "All right, let's get moving," said Jess as he started Gray into a walk. Just outside of town, two men were busy digging a grave for Colorado Dan, then stopped digging and nodded at Jess as they went by. I think that's supposed to say they. "Old Colorado Dan got himself a dirt blanket," said Denoyer. "I love these guys." I guess we can call him a cheat now," chuckled Augie. Jess picked up the pace, and they rode at a moderate gallop. "Hi, is it Lila, Ilya, Walker?" I don't know how to read that. I'm watching from Bali. Welcome from Bali. That's wonderful. I'm on holiday and was woken up this morning by an earthquake. Oh my goodness. Well, that's an exciting day. I don't know how common earthquakes are in Bali, but welcome to you, sweet friend. I hope you're enjoying the story. Now back to it. Let me take the comment down. Okay. Jess picked up the pace, and they rode at a moderate gallop, stopping several times to rest the horses and snack on the ham. They crossed several small streams and let the horses drink their fill. Jess was rubbing Gray's neck and looking up ahead on the trail. He checked the sun and saw it starting its downward spiral. "We'll make camp soon," said Jess. They rode another hour or so when Jess spotted a decent place to stop for the night, a good quarter-mile off the trail. Jess took care of the horses since Denoyer and Augie were wary of Gray and Sharps after the incident the day before. They busied themselves with making a fire and heating some beans with 3 thick slices of the ham mixed in. Jess took time to string his cans with rocks around their perimeter. Oh, that's smart. Augie was watching him with interest. "Do you do that every night?" he asked. "These cans have saved my hide more than once," he said without looking up. "Huh," was all he said. They ate, and Denoyer made coffee. Jess filled his cup, took a sip of it, and made a sour face before spitting it out. "What did you make this with? Dirt?" he asked. Denoyer shrugged his shoulders. "I guess I'm just used to buying the cheapest stuff I can get," he said defensively. "Throw that out, and I'll get you some real coffee," he said, as he got up and pulled out a bag of arbuckles from his saddlebags. "Here, use this." Denoyer looked in the bag, hoping to find the peppermint stick, but when he looked up from the bag at Jess, he was getting ready to pop it in his mouth. "Wonder why there's a peppermint stick in it." "You ain't sharing?" he asked. Jess broke the stick. Oh, Jess had put a peppermint stick in there. Okay, I get it. Jess broke the stick in half and gave Denoyer the other half. He's so generous. I mean, these guys have been just complete morons. They're very endearing morons, but I love how they're setting this up, how strong his character is and how he extends kindness beyond what is even expected or deserved. Augie frowned at both of them. "What about me?" he asked. Denoyer handed him the bag. "Here, you can make the coffee," he said. Augie snatched it from him angrily. He threw the other coffee out and began making a new pot. When it started getting dark, Jess kicked sand on the fire, and they all went to sleep. Chapter 7. In the morning, Jess opened his eyes first and looked at the other 2 who were sleeping soundly. He picked his pistol off his stomach, put his hat on, and holstered his pistol as he slowly stood up. He got the fire going and started making a pot of coffee. The aroma of it slowly woke Augie and Denoyer. They sat up and yawned. Augie got up and walked over to some bushes to relieve himself. Jess was pouring a cup of coffee when Augie made a strange noise and stiffened. Someone get a gun," he stammered as he waved his right hand back at them. Jess heard the low guttural growl and smiled as he stood up and walked closer to Augie. "Shadow, where have you been, boy?" said Jess as he walked over to where the wolf was standing, with his ears folded back and his fangs bared as he growled at Augie. He stood there with his pants down at his ankles, afraid to move a muscle. Shadow immediately sat down and looked up at Jess, who pulled the cans and strings down so he could come into the camp. When he did, he immediately jumped up on Jess, putting his front paws on his shoulders and licking his face while Jess rubbed his ears. "How you been, boy?" he asked. Shadow stopped licking his face and ran over and smelled Denoyer, who was holding his pistol in his hand. Shadow sniffed the barrel of the gun and then barked loudly. "Holster that gun before he takes your hand off," advised Jess. "You got a dang timber wolf for a pet?" asked Denoyer, as Augie walked back over to them, buttoning his pants. "He scared the crap out of me," he said as he tucked his shirt in. "So how's come he just showed up like this?" "I don't know," said Jess. "He seems to find me whenever I need help. It's a strange thing, and I'm not sure how to explain it. I helped him get out of a wire snare, and ever since he's been showing up to help me when I need it. Then he just takes off when he wants to. I haven't seen him for a while now." Shadow went over to Sharps and Gray, who bent their heads down to him. They moved him around gently and playfully. "Dang horses are nicer to him than they was to us the other day," complained Augie as he rubbed his sore chest. "Let's get sewing. Welcome, sweet friend. You woke up late. It's okay. You can go back. It's a great book. Definitely go back and listen." Um, complained Augie as he rubbed his sore chest again. "They were skittish about him for a while, but now I think they're friends," said Jess as Shadow walked over and curled up at the foot of his bedroll. They cooked a meal and sat around the fire eating. They threw the bone from the ham to the wolf, leaving a nice chunk of meat on it. He made quick work of cleaning the bone off before starting to chew on it. Denoyer and Augie kept watching the wolf cracking the bone. "Dang, Timberwolf's got a strong bite," declared Augie. "I hear they can rip a man's arm clean off." "He's unusually large for a timber wolf," said Jess. "Strong as a bull and smart, too." Augie watched Shadow crunching the bone into pieces, and he held his food closer to his chest. "I think we better get him another hand before he starts eyeballing us," he said as he nervously looked at Shadow. "He won't hurt either of you as long as he knows you mean no harm," said Jess as he finished his plate of beans and ham and set it down. Shadow stood up, walked over, and licked it clean. Denoyer set his empty plate down on the ground, and Shadow moved over to it. The plate scooted around on the ground as he licked it clean. When he finished, he turned to look at Augie, who still had a little food on his plate. He put it on the ground away from him. "Go on, you can finish it because I don't want you to be hungry," he said. Augie's like, "I'm done. Here you go." They're at least smart about how to handle the wolf. Shadow walked over and cleaned the plate. When he finished, he rubbed up against Augie and almost knocked him over. "He sure is strong," he said as he straightened up and picked some hair off his new shirt. "So tell me about this hideout in the woods we're headed to," said Jess as he poured himself another cup of coffee. "Well, we was told that it's at least 3 miles into the woods, near a stream," said Denoyer. "They built a large shanty between 2 trees that has 3 sides to it. They built it out of the saplings they cut down to clear a spot for their camp. They tied a tarp to the top of it to keep the rain out. Their old partner said they'd never leave the place. They trap their meat and catch fish out of the stream that runs through the woods by them." He finally told Ehrlich and Persault that he wanted to leave because they never had coffee or whiskey, since they won't chance going into any town for supplies. They ambush passerby that get too close and get some supplies that way. Then they torture and kill them so they can't tell anyone about their whereabouts. "I'm surprised they let the one man go," said Jess. "He said they's childhood friends since they was youngins," added Augie. "They told him he could leave, and they cut his fingers off to let him know they's serious about not talking. Said if he ever did, they'd find him and cut everything else off and let him slowly bleed to death." "All right then," said Jess. "Let's get moving. We still have a long way to go." "What about him?" asked Augie as he pointed to Shadow, who was curled up by Jess's bedroll. "He'll either follow us or he won't," said Jess. "At least that's how he usually does it." They broke camp and headed out to the trail and continued on it. Shadow stayed up with the horses since they weren't riding very fast. After a few hours, they stopped at a watering hole to let the horses drink their fill. Jess was chewing on a piece of jerky when he thought he saw something off in the distance. He pulled his spyglass out and extended it. Shadow lifted his head and sniffed the air, looking in the same direction as Jess. "What are you looking at?" asked Augie. "A man is walking this way, and he ain't wearing any shoes or boots," he said as he put the spyglass away. "Let's go and have a look-see." They started their horses, riding them at a slow gallop. Shadow started running faster toward the man. When he saw what looked like a wolf heading his way, followed by 3 men on horseback, he turned and started running the other way. Shadow was almost on him when the man tripped and fell face down in the dirt. Shadow put his 2 front paws on the man's back and growled. "Go away, you beast!" wailed the man. Jess and the others finally reached them, and Jess jumped out of the saddle. "Leave him alone, Shadow," he said as he slipped his hammer strap off and put his hand on the butt of his pistol. Shadow moved a few feet from the man and stood there with his ears still folded back. The man turned onto his back and held his hands up by his shoulders. "I ain't armed," he said nervously, "and I done been robbed, so there ain't nothing left in my pockets." Jess reached down and offered his hand. The man took it, and he hauled him up on his feet. He wore a disheveled suit that had seen better times. "2 men robbed me this morning when I woke up," he said. "They took my wagon and all the money I had on me." "Which way did they head out?" asked Jess. "I watched them until they were out of sight," he said. "They were still on the trail going to Jasper, which is where I was headed to sell my goods. Can I have some water?" Jess got a canteen and handed it to him. He took a long drink of it and handed it back. "They didn't leave me any water. I remembered this watering hole from before, so I figured I'd get my fill and wait for someone else to show up at it and maybe get help." "How much did they take from you?" asked Denoyer. "Almost $100, but all the things in my wagon are worth more than that." Jess looked around a few moments and rubbed the back of his neck before turning back to the man. "Why don't you get up on my pack horse and we'll see if we can get your wagon back?" "Really? Those 2 men look to be pretty tough," he cautioned. "Don't worry, we can handle them," said Augie. "So why do you have a wolf?" he asked. "Don't worry about him," said Jess as he helped the man up in the saddle on Sharps. Shadow sat to the side and kept staring at the man. "Why's he staring at me?" he asked. "We think he's hungry," cackled Augie as Jess climbed up in the saddle. I love these guys so much. "Oh, my name is Henry Dukesbury," the man said as he smiled at Jess. "I'm Jess Williams. These 2 are Augie and Denoyer," he said. "We're bounty hunters." "Now that you say that, you do look the picture on the cover of those dime novels written about you I have in my wagon. I sell a lot of them," he said. "Read every one of them, too. If Jess Williams can't find my wagon, nobody can." "Does a wolf have a name?" "Shadow," said Jess. He looked at the wolf, who was still watching him as he cocked his huge head back and forth. "Nice to meet you, Shadow," said Henry. The wolf barked once, and the man flinched in the saddle. "I think he's still hungry," laughed Augie. "Oh, my," said Henry. Okay, we're at chapter 8. We're going to stop there, or I'm not going to have a voice for Friday. Stop sharing. Go back up here. All right, guys, I hope you're enjoying it. So I don't pre-read anything because I like to react with you guys. And I'm loving it. I thought, okay, it'll be a Western. It'll be interesting. It'll be a nice, light kind of change of pace from all the heavy stuff we've been reading. And I don't know, I'm just over the moon that it's so good. It really makes me want to read Lonesome Dove. Lonesome Dove is considered one of the best Western novels ever written, but it's long. Let's look how long Lonesome Dove is. This one is, I think, like 320 pages or something. Lonesome Dove. How long is Lonesome Dove on Kindle? 946 pages. So if we were going to read Lonesome Dove after this one, it would take us all summer. So September, we're going to read Jonathan Cahn's new book because that comes out. What's the date? It says the average reader will take 14 hours and 24 minutes to read the book at the rate of 240 words a minute. I don't think I read that fast out loud. I read really fast, slowly. Or to myself. So if I'm reading, like if I were reading this book, Shane, if I were reading it to myself, I could finish it in a day with that many pages. 14 hours, man, maybe we could read Lonesome Dove. And then Jonathan Cahn's new book, when does that come out? September something. 2024. Let's see. That one is called Dragon's Prophecy. And I think I've got it pre-ordered. It comes out September 3rd. So I wonder if we could get through Lonesome Dove through the summer. I've got 2 camping trips I'll be gone for, but I don't think either of those are on. I think only one's on Wednesday. I may look at that one. We're still going to read Tom Sawyer, but that's a shorter one. We can read it anytime. I love a summer read. Do you guys? So if we did it in 14 hours, it would take us 7 weeks basically to get through it, which would be the summer. So just think about it. I don't know if you guys want to invest that long in a book, but I've always wanted to read it. And this one, if it's anywhere near as interesting as this one, I mean, I just thought, how interesting can a Western novel be? And I thought 300 pages, really. But Of Mice and Men was really good. It's not a Western novel, but it's kind of set back in that era. So I don't know. I'm really liking it. Gypsy, are you liking it? Who else is here with us? Let's get sewing. Ilya, or I wish I knew how to say your name. I hate butchering people's names. Jess is gone training somebody. I don't know if Vicki Carlton is still with us, or Summer, or Lynn. But if you're enjoying it, Jules Verne is a good. What is Jules Verne? I know the name. French novelist and poet. See, that sounds like torture to me already. Which book? Yeah, I don't know. Oh, wait. Around the World. Oh, yeah. That's funny that I couldn't place that. Around the World in 80 Days, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Those are some epic novels. I think we should consider those. I don't know which one. I don't know his style at all. You know what? I'm going to order one of those today. I'm going to leave that up. And then I can read 2 books at the same time as long as they are completely different kinds of books. So like I could read Jonathan Cahn and Shane at the same time. If I read 2 things that are even slightly alike, like if I read 2 novels that are both crime stories or something like that, and it didn't used to be this way for me, but since the comas, so if you guys are new here, I had 18 comas because of respiratory failure. But I'm okay now. But since then, I have a really hard time not melting characters together. So I have to read 2 very different books. And I do often have 2 books going. So I'm usually reading something to you and then reading 2 things on my own. I read a lot. Around the World in 80 Days. So that has never interested me, and I know nothing about it. Isn't that funny that I have just randomly made up my mind about something, because I'm not generally like that, without ever looking at it. So I'm going to look at those this afternoon because I need to read anyway. But yeah, French. I mean, I'm interested to see what his writing style is like. As a writer myself, if I've helped with several projects, but I've yet to finish my own book. But I've been published and Mysterious Island. Yeah, I've got that one. I've got that one pulled too. I've got From the Earth to the Moon, 20,000, I'm guessing that's Leagues Under the Sea, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Around the World. There's more. I've got the whole list pulled, I think. Lighthouse at the End of the World. Is that one Jules Verne? Doesn't say. I'll do some. Oh, it is. I'm a fan of lighthouses, so that one caught my attention. But I hope you guys are enjoying this one. I know it's way, way different than everything else we've read. Well, not so much, because we read Of Mice and Men. Vicky's in and out. Vicky, maybe you can listen to the rest on the way home while you're driving. I need to, if anybody knows how to do this, will you send me a message? Actually, I don't know if I could. I would like to have a podcast version of this show, an audio podcast. I know I can do it with my Friday night show, but I don't know if I can do it. Oh, do you love lighthouses too? I don't know if I can do it reading novels, like what the copyright issues might be for that to go out on like iHeartMusic or Apple Podcasts or something like that, I think there probably would be podcast issues. And what's funny is that's my favorite show that I do. My favorite one is this show. I love Friday nights too, but this, I don't know. I've just gotten so much out of reading books to you guys. I didn't expect it. But I really, really like it. And I love the company. Reading books is such a solitary thing, but reading them to you guys. And so, okay, so I have to tell you this little story and then we'll go. So I was watching the kids after the wedding this weekend. And so I had all four of them. So Cole's 11, Nora's 8, Atlas is 6, and Sophia is 5. And I was reading this book to them. And in this book, these little fairies that are supposed to guard the forest. I can't remember the name of the book. Wasn't very good. The little fairies that are supposed to guard the forest. Jules Verne is sci-fi. Okay, now I have to look. I love sci-fi. So I'm reading this book, and these 3 little fairies, are charged with guarding the forest. And anytime somebody does something that they don't like, they do something really mean, like something that humiliates the person or causes injury. And they've been told not to do this, right? So there's this little old man that is walking through the forest, and he's 90. I have a calming voice, even with a cold, huh? I'm so glad. I was so worried. I have such vocal fry from having a terrible sore throat. I don't know if it's strep or what. I had a fever all day yesterday, so we'll see. I'm tending to it though, and I'm pretty good at tending to things. But thank you, Vicki. That's very sweet. So I'm reading this book. Now, Atlas is in kindergarten, and you guys tell me if you think this is unusual. And I've worked with a lot of kids. I used to have an after-school program, worked with a lot of kids who have disabilities, learning disabilities, that sort of thing, and a lot of kids who don't. And I'm reading this book, and it says that the man is walking through the forest with this cane, and he's thinking to himself how proud he is that at his age of 92, he can still do that. And so Sophia, the 5-year-old, says, "Wow, that's really old." And Atlas says, without missing a beat, "Yeah, in 8 years, he'll be 100. Now, I don't know how much you know about little children and how they progress developmentally, educationally. That is very unusual for a 5-year-old not with fingers. He just knew, in 8 years, he'll be 100. To have that kind of grasp, and I'm not bragging, I just thought it was really interesting to have that kind of fluidity with numbers at that age is unusual. And so I messaged his dad, and I'm like, "I'm telling you, Atlas is a genius. I'm reading this book, and the guy's 92 years old, and Atlas says in 8 years he'll be 100, just pops off with it." And I just thought that was so interesting. And he's really smart and very conversational. I used to do interviews with him, and this weekend was so busy I didn't get a chance to. But I'm going to go up. Laura's baby's due July 22nd. They moved the date. So I'm going to go up, and I will definitely do interviews with Atlas and Sophie while I'm there. Atlas has got a little speech problem, and he had a cold, so he was really hard to understand. But he's really good in an interview. He's very natural in front of the camera, and so is Sophia. And so when I go up there, I'll interview them, and I'll have to put up some of my interviews with them. They're very cute. Summer says, "I just wish we could send audios. I'm always doing something while listening to you. Wish you could send audios." Oh, you mean instead of typing? Because it's hard to, I don't know what you mean there. Like doing a voice to text? Or are you saying you wish it was just audio so you could listen to it? You can actually just turn it on your phone or on your TV and turn it up, or, put it on your phone, put an earphone in or an earbud in and listen that way. That's what I do. If I'm driving and I'm listening to somebody, I'll do that. Or if I'm in the grocery store listening to a rumble, I'll do that. I guess it probably depends on your signal, but it would be really nice to be able to do the book club. I'm sure I would get copyright issues because there's Audible and all of that. And I don't want to get in trouble for copyright and that sort of thing. Send an audio comment. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's a way you could do that. I can't think of a way with Rumble. Either way, you'd still have to, once it printed out, you'd have to copy it and paste it into the chat. So yeah, you're screwed there, sweetheart. But if for anybody that got here late, the wedding was so sweet. My oldest son performed the service. So when I say my oldest son, my three kids aren't from Don. And then when I say our oldest son, I'm talking about Donnie, who's my stepson. So my oldest son, David, performed the service, and and Jake got teared up and weepy, and so then David got teared up and weepy and like had to significant pause to get himself back together. And then I started crying, and then my mom started crying, and it was interesting that this shirt looks black. It's actually green. Um, and so it was just lovely. I don't know. It was a very, they, if you have to know Jess and Jake, so they love the outdoors. They're frugal. The wedding was really just about the wedding. It was about them getting married. It wasn't about a big production, right? Which I would have been okay with too, because I love me a big production. But they just did it outside at this little park, and it was just, Jess, ever since I've known Jess, to prom, she wore combat boots. She's got a degree in wildlife management. So she's that tomboy kind of girl. And just a delight. So I'll show you just a few of the pictures. I should have pulled them up here. So there's one. That's them walking away after the ceremony. I just happened to catch them between two trees. Let's see if I've got another one close up. And there's the kiss. See if I can turn that so you don't have such a glare. I know it's hard to see. I'll upload them for Friday. And just look at her. Isn't she just beautiful? And she's just as natural and sweet, and just did normal hair. You can see she's got a very casual dress on. But anyway, that's all the pictures I got, because I wanted to be in the moment. I didn't. Let's get sewing. That is extraordinary, don't you think, for a child to have that fluidity with numbers? I've worked with so many kids who've struggled with math and tutored so many kids. And in my after school program, I designed a huge remediation program for one of our schools because they were teaching sight words, which is, I think, a horrible idea. Sight words should only be for words that can't be sounded out. And I would go through and cross everything off that could be sounded out, because what I found is the kids that went through to that school couldn't spell anything because they don't know how to phonetically disassemble a word. And so I had to teach. And what was so funny is, so all the kids that were behind in reading had to go to ESS, which is Extended School Services. And there they taught phonics. And I'm like, why don't you just teach phonics in the classroom? Well, because then you couldn't get the money for ESS. And nobody learns anything in ESS. If once you're in it forever. And I'm like, there should be a gradual defunding of each student in ESS. Unless you can prove that there's a reason they're not making progress. But you should be making enough progress that children would graduate out of it. So the first thing I would tell parents is, I'm like, let me assess them. So I would assess their reading. I had this really cool program called IQ, EYEQ. And it strengthens the eye muscles. And so what I found was a lot of kids that were diagnosed with dyslexia or attention issues and were struggling with reading, the problem was this weakness in the eye muscles, and I figured it out by accident. So this IQ thing, it's actually like a speed reading program, but it's really good for little kids, and it'll have them follow this dot back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it will have them follow words. And so like I had one kid who was in third grade who was reading at a kindergarten reading level, sweetest little kid. And he was so humiliated by this. And so when he came to me, I did my assessment on him and everything. And he said, they make me read the baby books. And I said, sweetheart, I said, how would it make you feel if, say, your teacher called on you to read something out loud? And his eyes welled up with tears. It still gets me. And I said, okay, I get it. And I said, what if I told you I could get you there? Would you be willing to work really hard for me? And he said, I've tried it. And they make me read the baby books and I just can't do it. I can't read. And I said, okay. So I had looked at his scores on this IQ thing, right? And I thought, I think this kid has got a muscle issue with his eyes. So what I did was I would take a sentence he was reading at a kindergarten level, like kindergarten in 2 months. I took a sentence from a book and I wrote it just on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper this way. And he was able to read a fourth grade book that way. And I thought, he's struggling with this ability to track, to keep his eyes moving back and forth, not lose track of his sentences. And I spaced the words out a little bit. And so then what I started doing was grouping the letters. So if you had a consonant blend at the middle or something like that, I would group that. That there would be a little space, tiny space between the TH and the IS. And so I told his parents, take him out of ESS immediately. It is exhausting. He's having to stay at school till 4:00. He's been in it for 2 years and he's not come past a kindergarten reading level. This is the definition of failure, and not on his part. And I had him for 8 weeks and I had him to grade level. 8 weeks. And I'm like just teaching phonetically. And we would do a lot of spelling stuff. So, the kids would have a hard spelling word and we had drums. And so my son David played drums and he would play rhythms for us. So I'm like, Because, that's the way you spell because, Becau. And so it was funny because the teachers would complain. They're like, I've got some of your kids in my class and they're, And then I also taught them sign language to give them a muscle memory for words. So if you're trying to spell hope, HOPE, and we would do it over and over again. So if they couldn't, because the memory is finite, but if you get a muscle memory to something, you retain it. And it was just amazing. Every single kid in the program, except for one little girl who had cerebral palsy, but I'll tell you that story in a second, we had to grade level within 8 weeks. These kids who had been in ESS for years. And so one of our little gals had cerebral palsy and was mostly nonverbal. She could say baby, and we taught her how to say my daughter's name. She loved my daughter, and she was in middle school. And so we would say, Mika, Laura, and she would be Iga, whoa, Iga, whoa. And I'm like, okay, she can talk. And so one day she's sitting and she's got a book and she's looking through this book and she gets to this page and she laughs. Now at school, all they're doing is putting coloring pages in front of her and she's crossing over them with a crayon. That's it. She's in a diaper, even though she is capable of using the bathroom. She gets to me. She's soaked and messy every day. And I'm like, she can get around. Like she leapfrogs. That's how she gets around. But that's her mode of transportation. And we shouldn't stop her from doing that just because she's in school. She should be able to ambulate however she ambulates. And so anyway, I don't know how much more I can say without, her grandparents were physically abusive to her. Her mother had died. She had like a flat spot on the back of her head from being kept in her wheelchair all the time. And I just I'm like, look, you can keep the Social Security money. Just let me take care of her. And they wouldn't do it because they didn't want to get in trouble. And I guess that would be fraud, but it just broke my heart. I'd seen him hit her, punch her in the head. They had been kicked out of the McDonald's and my brother worked at the McDonald's. And my brother's disabled. And he's like, he punches her in the head and, it just upset him to no end. And so anyway, one day she's reading this book and she gets to this page and she laughs. And it just struck me. And so I walked over and I said, what are you reading? And I thought she was just looking at pictures. And the bad thing is when a person is nonverbal, a lot of people automatically assume that there's some level of mental retardation there. And that is not necessarily the case. And I learned that lesson that day. And so she pointed at the book. And I looked at her and I said, Mika, can you read? And she laughed. And I thought, okay, this is a book she knows that somebody has read to her. And she's just laughing at the appropriate moment where she's heard this read to her. So I got a different book out and I had taught her sign language. So she kind of had a little bit of sign language. And so I had taught it to her and I was trying to teach it to the grandparents and I was trying to encourage the school to use sign language with her. And they're like, why should we use sign language? She can hear. And I said, right, I get that she can hear, but by you doing sign language to her, she's learning it and she can model that back to you. And then she can speak. I'm like, the reason that she's a behavioral issue is because she's frustrated. She can't talk. And so we need to talk to her with sign language while we're speaking out loud so that she starts putting this together and she can talk back to us. And they wouldn't do it. The grandparents absolutely wouldn't do it. I was so mad. And so I put a different book in front of her. And so I would point to a word. So I'd point to cat and she would do the sign for cat. And I'm like, son of a gun, if this kid cannot read. So I send a note to the school. I'm like, she can read. She needs harder work. We are still obligated to educate her, even if she can't speak. And I don't know if you guys have seen this in schools where if the child can't speak, they just basically sit in their chair and they vegetate there all day. It's just heartbreaking to me when she was obviously so intelligent. And so we just took off with it and, you know, teaching her more and more sign language and pointing to words. She could spell. I mean, it blew me away. It blew me away. Let's Get Sewing says, my grandson had a problem too. It turns out his field of focus was the size of a drinking straw. Yes, they put some kind of prism glasses on him and he went to, yes, right? Because it just kind of fish bowls out that view so that they can see. And we had a kid that had that too. We had another little kid that was on ADD medicine. And I started watching him. His name was Jacob. And I noticed, and he wasn't hyper was the thing. And so I noticed that I would ask him to do something. I'd say, Jacob, go ahead and get your backpack and get your spelling list out. And I'll be over there in a minute to help you with that. And so he would walk maybe 5 feet and he would stop. And so I just started watching him and I'm like, he would be sitting at a table talking to somebody and he would stop. And I would notice he had lost time. He couldn't quite remember where he was. And so I told his mom, I said, before they put him on ADD medicine, did they evaluate him for a seizure disorder? And they don't do this. And I don't know why, because attention problems can absolutely be caused by petit mal seizures, these little absent seizures. And there's no flopping or anything. The person just kind of zones out for a minute. It looks like daydreaming to the untrained eye. And so we were crossing a street one day. And so I had staff in the street and everything. And we were coming across and he was like third to last. And he stopped in the middle of the street. And I shouted at him. I said, Jacob, we're crossing a street. Pay attention. And he stood there for a minute. And then he kind of did that. And I was like, we're crossing the street, sweetheart. Remember? And he said, I didn't. And I'm like, he's totally having absent seizures. They took him, he got tested, and that's what it was. He didn't have ADD. He had these little seizures, and he was having like 300 of them a day, and nobody knew. And the ADD medicine can actually aggravate that. But yeah, he did great after that. Sweet little angel. I just have such a heart for kids. Anyway, I don't know how we got off on all of that. I guess talking about books, but we will definitely be here Friday. I warned you guys I might take last Friday off for the wedding, and I did. We'll be here on Friday, and I'm experimenting with this new app. I don't know if it's a new app. It's new to me I'm using it to make the thumbnail pictures for the videos. I'll probably only use it for Friday nights. It's called, DaVinci. And so I made a bunch of things for Friday night show. And so you guys watch for those new thumbnails because they're pretty freaking funny. I'm going to start putting those up because our viewership has gone down. I think probably because I've not been real consistent on Fridays. But a good thumbnail's enough to kind of pull people back in. So if you guys need anything, my email address is in the description section. So is my website. If you want to financially support the show, and if you do already, thank you so much. I know several of you do. Thank you so much for that. I had somebody from out of the country, and I can't remember where. I think I screenshotted it. And there's a physical address on her donation, but not an email address. I usually try to send out a thank you. Unless like you donate really regularly, and then I try to just thank you here because it gets a little cumbersome. But anyway, all that said, you can donate via PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App. That's in the details section, and I really appreciate it because it helps. There's a cost to doing the show, and that helps. It costs me about $8,000 a year to do both shows, so that's how much we're trying to make is enough so that it doesn't cost us anything. And thank you to those who do donate. Thank you to everybody who prays for me, prays for everyone on the prayer list, and prays for the show. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to close us out in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day and for my wonderful friends here on Rumble and YouTube and Facebook. And if anybody's over on Twitter has come over, we thank you for them. And I just pray that you would have your hand on them, that you would bless them as they come and go through this week, through this month, and this summer. I know that there are people that are hurting, that are struggling financially, that are struggling with health issues, struggling with separation and division in their families. And Father, I pray that you would hear our pleas, that you would bring reconciliation, that you would bring healing. If healing isn't in the plan, I pray you would at least bring comfort. And Father, for all of those who are struggling with loneliness, I know so many people are, I just pray that you would be a physical presence with those people, that you would have your arm around them, that you would hold them in your hand and let them know that they are loved. And we just thank you so much for that. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Also, last thing, if you go to YouTube, I'll have to find this for Friday. The movie is out, Renaissance. So the movie that I'm in about my near-death experience is out. I have to get the link to figure out how you can rent it. I'll message Anthony this afternoon and try to get that from him. It's going to be really good, I think. The preview was great. I don't know if I've still got the preview here. Hold on, let's go back here. Layers. I don't know if I saved it in here. Let's look at media files. I may have saved it. If I did, I'll play it again here. If not, I will get it up for Friday for sure. No, I don't think I recorded it. Doggone it. I hate that. Hold on, scrolling through here. Scroll. Maybe it's way at the bottom. No, I'll get that so that you guys can see that. And then I'll get the link so that you can go and watch the movie because it's going to be a good one. Pim Van Lommel's in it. I can't remember who else. I had that all written down at one point. Pim Van Lommel's in it. I'm in it. Who else? Oh, and I forgot a Bible verse today. Shame on me. Yep, I don't know what I did with it. But anyway, that's all I've got for you guys today. 10,000. Oh, wait, hold on. I got to block that person. Nope, you are forever gone. Mute user forever. Forever. Sandlot, sorry. All right, guys, I love you whole big bunches. I will see you on Friday. Take care until then. If you need something, shoot me an email. We'll see you guys soon. Nurse Penny, out.